Hi, everyone. This is Craig Zelzer here from PCDN Global. We're here for episode 11 of season 12, talking with Elisa Criscione. The topic will be Espresso Yourself, best title ever, merging coffee, tech, and social impact. For people who have not joined the PCDN Social Change Career Podcast live stream, this usually goes about an hour. We deeply appreciate hearing from our audience, particularly if you're watching on LinkedIn. So throughout the beginning and the entire session, please let us know where you're watching from, a couple of words about your background or interests, and also your questions and comments throughout the session. We'll try to bring them in as much as possible. This will be converted to a podcast episode, one of over 100, almost 40 episodes of the podcast, and you can access it on PCDN Global or any major podcasting platform. And we have 3 quick requests before we get started. First, if you like the podcast, please consider sharing and rating it. And again, you can go to PCN and search by topics. We have impact investors, foundation heads, activists, human rights professionals, grassroots change makers from over 30 countries. Please follow Elisa on LinkedIn and also Digital Coffee Future, and please share PCN with others. So Elisa is the founder and CEO of Digital Coffee Future, a knowledge hub for coffee digitalization information in the industry. She's also the founder and lead consultant of Expressing Origin, another wonderful name, a consultancy whose mission is to support tropical agricultural stakeholders to develop tailor-made solutions with a special emphasis on coffee and digitalization. Before fully dedicating herself to her career in coffee, she deepened her understanding of the application of digital solutions in agriculture in Ghana and also in Colombia in the sustainable development arena, where she first entered into contact with coffee. She holds a master's in coffee economics, which I didn't know you could do that, but it'd be interesting to hear more about that degree. So how much time did you spend planting coffee, harvesting coffee, selling it, and tasting it? In coffee economics and science from the University of Trieste, and an MSc in food policy from the City University of London, and a BSc in food and agriculture from the University of Gastronomic Sciences. She speaks Italian, English, and Spanish. I'm based in Medellin, Colombia. Elisa, thank you so much for taking time out of your afternoon. And where are you currently based?
Thank you for having me, Craig. I'm based in Italy, so we have a few hours of difference.
Which location in Italy?
I live close to Milan, a small city close to the Malpensa airport for anybody going and traveling to Malpensa.
Okay, thank you so much. And again, throughout the session, for people watching, let us know your questions, your comments. So Elisa, to start off with, how in the world did you wind up? I mean, there is a lot going around agriculture, both in terms of international development and private sector, and coffee is a huge industry. But have you always been a coffee fan since you were like 3 years old, or how in the world did you find this niche of like coffee and digital economics?
Yeah, thank you, Craig. It's actually very specific. You're right. It actually came to me in a process. So it was an interesting experience. After my bachelor degree, I had this amazing opportunity to move to Bogota and work there for an NGO that was working locally with food-related projects. At the time, I was not working yet with coffee, but I was living. So my the people that were living with me in the apartment were working with the coffee sector. So they were always coming, home, bringing this amazing coffees to taste. And really gave me the opportunity to see coffee in a different way. And this is kind of where my passion sparked for coffee. And at some point, I was really in my mind, I always felt like I wanted to fully dedicate to coffee at some point in life. And the technology piece came a bit later after my master's degree. I was looking to better understand what technology could do for global value chains. So not just coffee, but actually more broader, cocoa, palm oil, like those sectors that are very huge and are very complicated to grasp and understand. And I was starting this research with skepticism, to be honest, because we all know there is lack of devices, lack of internet access in many cases. So how can technology be of help in that case? Anyway, long story short, I had this opportunity to work for an agri-tech company in Ghana. And that was where I really understood, the importance of understanding technology from a user case perspective, from a local perspective. And anyway, kind of coming back to Europe after a bit of nomadic experiences, it was the moment to connect the coffee piece with technology, and this is how everything started.
And if you think back to your younger years, did you envision a particular career path or a place you wanted to have and when you were a teenager, since you're close to Milan, did you think about being in fashion or, food? Like you've always been interested in food and technology or, so what was the path to go from your, let's say, teenage years to studying agriculture and economics?
I think food has always been my interest since I was a kid. I was very lucky to grow up in a family where food was a big part of our daily routines, and that really sparked my interest in understanding. Okay, well, what's beyond just eating, and can we learn a bit more about the products and the origin of their products and the story behind them and how the food industry works. So that was when I started already as a teenager looking for universities and opportunities in the sector. And I ended up really loving and learning as much as I could about food in my bachelor degree. Also working in restaurants, which is also something I kept doing for longer, really trying to experience as much as possible that sector. And then through some trips I did at origin countries, visiting producers and visiting looking at different food systems, and my stay in Colombia, that was really when something clicked about, okay, yes, I want to do this, but I want to do it from the sustainable development perspective to really understand how we can, support stronger systems, which, there's still a lot to do.
And can you talk a little bit about, and we've had on a few guests who work in agriculture and sustainability, both in the finance and startup end, but in terms of the agricultural sector, I mean, not that you have to have the exact specifics, but in terms of economic output or the number of people in the world who are, both growing the crops and harvesting, like what is the scale of agriculture in terms of, what data do you like to show, whether it's around coffee or agriculture in general, that obviously we need food to eat and robots are not at the point where they're going to grow all the food. So what are some things you think around both the data of how big this sector is and, some of the trends?
Yeah, it's very hard to tell, to be honest. It's true what you said, it's huge. I mean, the food industry especially is really big, because if we consider like producers and then we consider all those actors that go from the producing aspect all the way to consuming, it's really a huge sector. But I mean, and it's also hard if we want to focus on coffee. There are multiple reports out there that are kind of quoting information about numbers of producing families in many different occasions, but it doesn't really feel like everybody agree with that number because it's so hard to really tell. Coffee is one of those industries that is really built on smallholder farmers. So people that have very small farms, sometimes even less of an hectare, 2 hectares. So it's really hard to put numbers on that. I can say though that just as an example, like Colombia, which I know you know well, they say that they should have around 500,000 producers or producing families working in the country, which is a huge number. But then, of course, again, it's not clear whether these are correct numbers, and we should really kind of try to extrapolate more and do much more research on it as well. So yeah, it's big, but we're not sure how big.
And thank you, Solomon, from Ethiopia. So we obviously were joking in the chat that we owe you a debt since coffee comes from Ethiopia. I've been a few times. It's a very strong coffee, and we have about 35 people from other parts of the world watching. So please let us know where you're watching from, your coffee questions, your career questions, and also a bit about your work and interest. So it's an interesting thing. Can you talk a little bit, one of the things we like to say at PCDN, that if you speak human, that, it's a really important skill set in any aspect of change making, whatever sector. And if you speak tech, that's a really important thing. So you speak human and tech and agriculture. So what kind of skills do you, even prior to launching Digital Coffee Futures, like how did you build your tech expertise, and how have you combined that kind of tech and human, and understanding that tech is not the solution, but it can be an aid in helping, coffee producers and harvesters and, roasters. Like, it can really help the industry. So how strong are you in tech? What skills did you develop, and how much was in academic training versus on the job? And obviously you have very strong human skills, but a little bit about that kind of reflection of what skills you found the most valuable.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a very important one. So I feel like the technology aspects is something that I really built by learning, researching, and also a lot on the job. I don't have an IT background, as you presented through the introduction, and I feel like I still don't consider myself a tech expert in the sense that I don't speak tech language, but I definitely am able to make the bridge between the human aspects and the needs that somebody in the coffee sector might have towards a tech provider. So I feel like that's been key, and this is also what Digital Coffee Future does, really supporting to translate this information and making sure that we understand user needs on a very practical and concrete point of view, and then matching that user needs potentially from the human aspects to the tech processes that might need to happen in order to make sure that those needs are matched. So it's been a process. I also feel like technology is this super dynamic environment where every day there's something new to learn. Just looking at AI right now and everything that is happening, there's definitely a lot to learn. And a big part of what I do on a daily basis is kind of trying to learn and stay up to date with everything that happens tech. But of course, it takes time, and it's definitely a team effort. DCF is not just me; it's a team of people that coordinate and work together to make sure that we can still continue translating tech into into human.
And then can you talk a little bit about, I was going to say the origin story, but both the origin story of Digital Coffee Futures and Expressing Origin? I'm not getting the name right. So at what point did you launch them at the same time? And then how did the idea come to fruition? And what services are you offering, and what challenges or problems are you helping others address through your services?
Yeah, thank you. So, Expressing Origin came after. Came before Digital Coffee Future. It was more how I started working into the intersection of technology and coffee. At the time, after my experience in Ghana and my understanding, my interest to work at coffee and digitalization, I dedicated like a full 6 months of just doing research and really understanding what was the state of the art of coffee digitalization in general. So that was like, okay, well, let's start from the beginnings and really understand, how the industry is doing, what is the level of digitalization, and depending on different stakeholders. So anyway, that was like more like personal research. And that really helped me to start building a network, which I think is really key, especially when you work as an independent professional and you start building your career in a very specific sector, like really understanding the needs and understanding the people that can help you understand better the sector. No, so that was the first step. I started in this way, and then Expressing Origin came as an opportunity to do some consulting work. Which was also kind of part of my, networking experience in the sense of really reaching out to people and offering some of the support that I could give them. And starting working with different organizations as a consultant, I realized that there was this urgency of this need to better understand what technology meant in coffee. But then at the same time, it was not clear from many coffee stakeholders what we were talking about when we talk about technology in coffee. So the idea came to make this content more accessible, to really make a difference and make sure that people could access information and could feel supported in understanding how to digitalize their businesses. So long story short, Digital Coffee Future was a way to really make this information accessible, reach more people, and kind of create an environment where information was there and was accessible for everyone. I would say now, since the start of this year of DCF Digital Coffee Fishery in 2020, things have evolved. We are now working towards making sure that coffee actors can digitalize their systems successfully, which takes time. And how we do that in different ways. We offer content and knowledge, like we said. So it's open; anybody can learn and see content on our website to understand, when we talk about digitalization in coffee, what we mean and how it can be applied. Then secondly, we offer education packages, and these packages are kind of a starting point for people to start learning and understanding how they can approach technology solutions and how they can start working on their digitalization journeys. And then finally, we also offer direct consultancies. So really programs and projects that have been built for specific clients that have, the need to a more one-to-one support and really understand how to kind of get their business digital to the next level. So this is basically how we work.
Wonderful. And Solomon, please feel free to share also a little bit more what you're doing with coffee in Ethiopia. So a couple of things when someone, digitization can mean many different things. So if you can speak a little more broadly, not just around coffee. So if someone's interested in technology and agriculture and sustainability, again, you said I'm not a coder. I mean, I speak some tech more than the average person, but I can't build my own tech. But I think I know how to leverage it for my work and help others figure out what's the right approaches. So can you share a little bit, like, what does it mean to digitize? Is it as simple as just having an inventory system? Is it helping people track the product and how much makes it to market? Is it about fair pricing? Is it about the right set of ingredients, or not ingredients, but let's say fertilizer and crops? And then, like, if someone wants to start exploring how to work at this intersection, again, we've talked some, but what skills do they need to know? Is it how much is finance versus how much is really being able to engage with the stakeholders or communities that are growing crops? So a little bit of that reflection.
Yeah, it's a bit of everything, like all of the above in a way, because it really depends who you are in the value chain. So, for example, the coffee sector is really broad in the sense that we have players that are actively producing the coffee, and then we have players that trade the coffee. Then we have roasters, of course, that are kind of fundamental for us to drink the coffee as final consumers. And at the end of the day, when it comes to all these actors being involved, every one of them has different needs. So the idea is really to understand, okay, what is first of all, not as much as your need, but especially starting from what's your challenge or what's your problem, and how to understand how technology can support, as you said, it's just an aid. So how can we use technology as a tool to solve some of these challenges that they're identifying? So in this case, I think that it can be having an inventory system that works better if you don't have one, or if you haven't, if yours is not working well. It could be supporting the commercial traceability of a product. It can be also supporting sustainability compliance. I mean, these days with new policies coming up every day, such as the deforestation-free product regulation happening in Europe, it's always more important to use technology to track information and to somehow guarantee your compliance with particular regulations or particular standards. And then it really depends, because we can start from generic data management to then go for like more specific platforms that are also maybe connected with machines such as roasting machines and coffee machines. And so this is a completely different level. But digitalization is anything that really helps to use technology solutions to improve your business, basically, as a stakeholder.
And so can you talk a little bit about, because there are lots of stories about people coming with apps or services where, and often it's not imposed, let's say it's someone has an idea from outside a community or outside a country, like let's do X. I've seen this, and they invest a lot of resources, and they're going to magically make things better. So can you talk about some of the challenges you've seen around not necessarily your work, but let's make coffee production more sustainable. So we're going to build an app, or like, what are some of the things you've seen that haven't worked, that when people are thinking, and I don't want you to name like institutions, but just let's say processes or approaches where tech has been a critical component and it either hasn't been adopted, the connection's not there, it doesn't fit the context, or, you know, have you seen much of that in the larger, let's say, sustainability and agricultural industry?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. And I think this is also one of the, of the reasons why Digital Coffee Future started as a company. Because at the end of the day, unfortunately, when we talk about digitalization efforts in coffee, but to be honest, in agriculture in general, there are challenges happening. So when talking about these challenges, we can see that in many cases, adoption rate, and it's interesting. This part is particularly interesting because I'm just referring to this new report that was published at the end of last year in collaboration with Beanstalk and USA, that said, on an overall level, adoption rate it really varies from different regions of the world. But just as an example, for Southeast Asia, they were saying that only 10% of people are actually adopting technologies for agriculture. So numbers are really low, and I think this is low for many different reasons. For what you said, somebody in an office thinks of the perfect technology, and they invest a lot of money, but also time and effort to build it. But oftentimes it is not representative of the needs of the users, or is not representative of the needs of the local context in which the users are living. And this unfortunately is happening over and over again, which is causing, of course, complexity after the first piloting phase. So normally the pilot goes somehow well, and then you can find yourself with complexity in really adopting or scaling, the adoption of that particular technology. And also, maybe the last point I wanted to make is that sometimes I feel like this technology comes more from an idea and not from a problem. So it's like, okay, well, you want to build a technology platform. Let's really understand first if there are potential users that have that problem, and this platform would help them solve the problem. Because otherwise, if we start from the idea, sometimes we lose the big picture, and that also causes challenges in adoption and success rate.
So I mean, there is a saying, sorry, don't fall in love with your solution, because obviously, if your only solution's a hammer, everything will look like a nail. I don't know what the coffee equivalent is, but can you generalize a little bit, saying, if you're working, whether it's participatory development or social impact or impact investing, do you have almost like some guidelines, that affect how you do your work, or your team does your work, or just your recommendations as people, whether they're from communities, from a support group in the country or a city or outside? Like, what are some things you would say when you're trying to address large scale social challenges? Here's some suggestions or cautions. Like you've talked about, don't fall in love with the solution, but any other things you've developed from your own experience or you've learned from others?
Yeah, well, this is a big question. I think for me, it's always like really understand the big picture. So a lot of research needs to happen before any particular program is developed or solution is presented. And I think this is sometimes we kind of miss the point of doing the assessment first, and we go all the way for the project planning and implementation, which is fine because we understand. I mean, we live in a world where there is so much activity, and we always need to find the best solution in the least amount of time possible. So that's of course like it's part of the rush that everybody's living with. But I do believe that especially when we talk about such complex systems, doing research and really investigating the needs and the different contextual information from the people that you are thinking of working with or supporting in some way is really key to really understand what are the options there and whether what you're thinking could be successful in the near future, or maybe you can change your mind and do something else. So that's definitely one aspect. And then of course it's I feel like it's also very important to be surrounded with people that challenge your ideas and your statements as well, because as much as anybody can be a very good independent professional, or in my case a founder of a company, you always have to have a team of people and also colleagues or external advisors or supporters or competitors even. They really make you understand whether you're going in the right direction or not. I think that's really key.
And for anyone, let's say, brave enough or crazy enough to start their own company or nonprofit, I mean, I've done both, and there's lots of ups and downs. How did you decide, because you could have looked for work in an INGO, international NGO, or EU institution, or a bilateral. So how did you decide that starting your own coffee was the right decision for you? And any thoughts for others who have a strong set of skills and trying to decide if building your own thing, obviously with others, is the right choice, or being part of another, let's say, larger institution?
Yeah, well, this is a very hard question, especially depends now when if it's a challenging week or not, I think. But in general, it's a process. I mean, for me, there was a point when I was working as an employee or, supporting a different company and organization, where I felt like there were some boundaries that were not allowing me to do everything I wanted to do on a professional level. So it really came a point when I was like, well, I would like to start working as an independent consultant and do some work more independently, because I feel like I can provide more value and I can feel happier basically doing this type of work. Digital Coffee Future as like funding and registering a company was something that actually happened with less planning, in the sense that through the work of being a consultant, I realized that there was this need, and this problem. So the idea was like, okay, well, if we can solve this problem in a better way through a company, then we should go for it, because the sector really needs it. And this is nowadays, after a few years, I must say it's still challenging. Again, there are weeks that go better than others, but I do think that is at the end of the day what kind of helps me go through the day is really the purpose that I feel like that I really believe that there is a vision that we're moving towards, and we can provide interesting support for people that want it and that are looking for it. So that's kind of what drives me to the next days over and over. And I really hope I can continue doing this for a long time.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about the team or the partners or consultants? So, how many are coffee farmers, or how many are, let's say, trade experts, or how many are digital education designers? Like what, maybe not the size, but the type of team or consultants who come together to help deliver your services and products?
Yeah, well, we're a small team, so and the nice part is that everybody provides a different expertise and a different perspective. It's very nice because the majority we are almost a woman-led team, in the sense that the majority of the members are female, but we also it's really kind of what makes us stand out is the experience of everybody, and the fact that each team member is really providing a different perspective. And also very interestingly, everybody comes from different backgrounds. So that's kind of what really helps make this team strong. We started working with with different people. Also, many volunteers helped us to go to be where we are now. So I'm actually very grateful to many people that just supported for some time and then left, and then maybe join again for a particular support for helping us organizing an event perhaps, or something very specific. We work also with some freelancers that help us on and off, which is also very key, because when you're working on building and growing a company, sometimes you also have to make sure that you can work with people on a more like independent level. I think that's also something to consider. And then the team is consolidating these days. I think like this year is going to be a nice year for stronger consolidation. So we are working with communication experts that are really trying to help us with changing or improving our communication towards the coffee sector and other sectors like sustainable development sector, etc. We're working with an expert on education and digitalization for different actors. And then we work with a great program lead that really helps us coordinate all the work that we're doing, especially in Latin America and different countries. So that's it's been a very challenging past year, but also very nice to see how the team comes together to make this happen.
So I'm gonna ask you a coffee question again. For people watching, let us know where you're watching from. We have about 30 people from around the world, and we'd love to hear questions and comments. So I don't think you met my wife Catalina, but you know her, and so she's Colombian. We met in the U.S. and we worked together at PCN. When we started dating, I wasn't a coffee drinker. I had like one cappuccino a year if I was out of the US. And now I drink coffee all the time, and tea, and obviously water. And so in Colombia, I think has the best coffee in the world. Solomon, I'm not trying to offend you. In Ethiopia, each country has its own type of coffee. But we had dinner with some new friends, and the husband works in the coffee trade. And he's like, unless you grind your own coffee and weigh it, you're not a real coffee drinker. So we've gotten to the point we do grind it every day. I don't weigh it, but just for you speaking, not professionally, but you as a human being, like how do you prepare your coffee or espresso? Like for people who enjoy coffee, like what is your recommendations around preparing it? Do you weigh it? Do you grind it? Does it matter the kind of beans? And then just any other thoughts on like, as a consumer of coffee, like what makes it better for people who like it?
Yeah, I must agree with your new friend in the in the coffee trading sector. I do grind it and weigh it every day because I do think it makes a difference, especially for depending on the preparation. I love my coffee as filter coffee. I know I'm Italian and people might expect I drink lots of espressos, but actually that's not the case. For me, espresso is more like a one-time situation where I'm somewhere when they offer me amazing espresso. But at home, it's mostly filter coffee, either through a V60, which I don't know if you know it, and for the audience, it's kind of a filter that is similar to the filter that you can find automatically in the US. But then there are other like manual machines, if we could call it that way, like French press can be one, AeroPress can be another. So I am really like a filter coffee lover, and I try to prepare it in many different ways depending on the mood of the day. Yeah.
So one of my best friends, I've been friends with the wife for like my whole life. So Kata stays with them. Sometimes I stay with them. And last time I was in the US in August, or in their neighborhood, they got this new fancy cappuccino machine where you can set. I mean, they were so happy with it because they said they were spending $5 or $6. Coffee, a cup of coffee in a lot of cafes in the US is expensive. So they got this fancy machine. You could set the strength and the brew and chocolate and foam. And I mean, so any other thoughts? I mean, one question, do you have any other favorite devices? And then this is more subjective, but is there a place you've been in the world? I mean, there's tea culture too, and but any place where you feel like the consumption of coffee is really an art, or like there's so much relationship involved. It's not just sitting and drinking. So like, because you've been in lots of different countries, so how people have coffee in Colombia versus Ghana versus Italy, is there any place you've been almost more impressed in terms of like how it's integrated into like conversation or just being and not just drinking the coffee on the run?
Yeah, well, I mean, my passion for coffee started in Colombia, so I always gonna be a very big fan of like the Colombian perspective on coffee drinking, in general, because it's really, and there are differences also there, because nowadays local consumption of high quality coffee in Colombia and other countries is increasing, other producing countries is increasing, but it's not always been the case. I have coffee friends that will tell me, that in many of the producing countries, in many cases, the coffee that stays in the country is a coffee that is not high quality enough to be shipped elsewhere. So this is, of course, something that we should consider and we should improve I think, as a global system. The opportunity for people that produce coffee to also drink great coffee. So that's one side, and I think Colombians are doing it a very interesting way. Like there is a lot of awareness nowadays on higher quality coffee and how you can really drink and experience coffee from different departments in Colombia. I mean, there's so much that you can choose from. And as an Italian, I would say, that the way in which Italians drink coffee has always been part of my childhood, and of course it's part of who I am. But I think it's less, and I don't know if people from Italy will agree with me, but it's less about the coffee itself. It's more about like the idea of drinking with somebody. So kind of the sharing experience, and the fact that when you say to somebody, let's go grab a coffee together, it's more like because you want to have a chat for like 10 minutes about, how their day is going and how, everything. So that's it. That's also very, very nice. But I mean, I was so happy and to be invited in an event in Seoul in November, and that was also an amazing opportunity to visit a country that I never visited before, where the specialty coffee scene is really growing, and you see all the different cafes everywhere that are offering amazing coffees that you can drink, and really a different way also to drinking coffee, with cafes being open until very late at night, which will be very late for Italians to go and drink a coffee in the evening. So it's, everywhere it's nice to see that there are very different ways in which we drink and enjoy coffee
so going back a little bit more to the economics of coffee, is there data that you either have some solid data or from your own experience reflection? So in terms, because I don't generally go to Starbucks, I won't say never, but in the US maybe I'll go when I'm there. But if you go and spend $4 or $3 for a cup of coffee at a Starbucks, and it's imported from another country, like the growers, what percentage of the revenue are they getting? And there's also the roasters, and there's also the whatever you call the people shipping and wholesale. So any thoughts in terms of like how fair is? I mean, there was a very powerful movie maybe 20 years ago called Black Gold, which looked at the coffee industry and how much Starbucks was. It wasn't just Starbucks, but it focused a lot on Ethiopian farmers and cooperatives, and just how little the growers of coffee actually got at, if you think of the supply chains. And so is there some data on that, or is it like, and then what is happening in the coffee world? There's fair trade coffee, there's organic coffee, but is there hope that the growers of coffee actually are going to get more of the proceeds, or is like this race to the bottom? And so, and what's working and not working?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for this question. I think, it's the coffee sector has many experts working on the economic side and really trying to support coffee growers to get more of that share in the market. To be honest with you, I think that unfortunately the situation is very similar to what you watch in the Black Gold movie, because at the end of the day, The majority of the percentage made in the value stream normally goes to roasters, retailers, and so actors that work more like towards the end market side. This has always been the case. This is because of many different reasons. Of course, I mean, in some cases, marketing for some companies is a big chunk of what you pay then for the coffee. But there are also companies that are trying to, like traders that are buying coffee, or roasters that are buying coffee more directly nowadays. From producers or cooperatives or small exporters that are really trying to increase the percentage that farmers get. In some cases, I've read multiple reports. I think in some cases you can see even a gain of less than 10% in the value stream. In some cases, it can be higher. It really depends. Something that I want to kind of highlight, which has been very much pushed forward in the past couple of years in the coffee sector, is kind of the movement to living income. It's very important to see how many conversations and discussions are happening to make sure that, depending on the countries of origin, which of course prices and living income change so much from one country to another. People are trying to see, okay, well, how can we make sure that we pay the producers where we source our coffee from more sustainably, so they can live a good, kind of reach a good living income, but even have like a prosperous income. So in the case that they can go above than that. It's a process. The system, is being built in a way that unfortunately the situation is of power imbalances in the industry, but I really hope that in the future these processes and can really help get producers a better share of that value. And why not, maybe hopefully digitalization and digital tools can also help to make that happen.
Thanks. So Dylan just asked a question. Thanks, Dylan. In your experience, research, insights, what is the core reason for coffee farmers getting a small portion of the wholesale price of roasted coffee? And obviously this is not just for coffee, it could be for cacao or almost any agricultural product.
Yeah, that's true. So thank you, Craig, and thank you, Dylan, for the question. What you said just now, Craig, is really true. I mean, unfortunately, the food system is being built in a way that producers always get a very small piece of the cake because of how this has been always built, and the fact that, of course, at the end of the day, also thinking of a consumer maybe spending much more on their final product we know it can be challenging. So we also know that the type of communication to consumers needs to improve in order for them to understand that, like, for example, in Italy, it's always very common that you go out and you get an espresso for €1, €1.20, which is much cheaper than maybe what you would pay in the US. And there's still a lot of communication that is happening right now to consumers, saying, if you keep asking for this price for an espresso, it's very unlikely that the producer at the very beginning of the value stream is getting a fair price for their coffee. So it's a bit of it's a both way conversation in which we also need to make knowledge more accessible for consumers when they choose what to buy from the shelves, but also very much potentially a more political conversations to have internally for the stakeholders that are part of the industry.
Thanks, Dylan. Great question. And a follow-up is, because the discussion around living wage, I mean, one, it's been around forever. And in some ways, even if you think of fast fashion or any of these things, it's like there's a small percentage of companies where sustainability and equality is at their heart of what they do. It's very small. And, some premium companies, it'll be a small percentage. So do you stay optimistic? I'm talking more about equal distribution of opportunity or wages, that we might make progress, or, in 20 years, we're going to be having the same discussion, because there's a question, how much is education versus how much is regulation versus how much is taxation? So And then for people who want to work on, let's say, economic justice and agriculture, any recommendation that they can work for a place like Oxfam, or they can go into EU policy, but just thoughts, because there's all different ways to work on these issues, whether it's helping growers, starting your own farm, being an investor, but like, what are the ways to influence this system?
Yeah, well, this is a kind of the million-dollar question. I think, it's I have to be optimistic because I work in this industry, so I really would like to see improvement in the next 10 years or so. So I really hope that we can get there. Also because for the coffee sector, but not only for coffee, there is a huge migration happening these days. So what happens is that many people are just leaving farms because this is not economically sustainable anymore. In addition to the climate change, challenges also happening and increasing on an annual basis. So of course, if we want to continue drinking coffee in the on a global level and as an industry, we have to start making progress. So I think that's really important. On the other side, I think that what people decide to do and in terms of contributing to improving the system can be very broad. I've seen friends and great friends building companies from scratch and really trying to change the trading dynamics of coffee, deciding that they wanted to pay more for the coffee providers and wanted really to build strong relationships with them. But then I also seen great efforts made by NGOs that are trying to, push important discussions and also political changes. But I am a strong believer in the fact that we need also to change the system from within, if it's possible. So maybe working, with bigger corporations, even though it seems challenging most times, and it is challenging, is still part of the important effort to change the system. So I think that's really important. And thank you for sharing about Tony. So yes, they're doing an amazing work with chocolate, and I hope we can have more of these companies in the food sector in general.
Yeah, so Tony's is amazing because they try to filter out all forced labor. They try to pay living wage. I mean, and they claim they can never be 100% sure, but they're just, and it's good chocolate. I've gotten it a few times. So I have a question. Dylan got another one, but just a follow-up question. So again, if someone wants to work on advocacy or policy, what are some other institutions, like, because Oxfam's doing a lot of work on this, but other places you'd say, if your passion is, let's say, food and sustainability and advocating for justice, any other, one, you could go work for a place like Unilever or Nestle, be on the inside, but what are some other places, is it the International Labor Organization, or just places that you might say, if you're really passionate about kind of agriculture and equality, other places people might look for careers?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the famous UN departments. I mean, if we talk about the Food and Agriculture Organization, I think these institutions are also extremely key. And it's nice to see that even though they are also very big and very complex, all different departments are kind of looking always to innovate themselves and to really kind of push sustainability forward on many different ways. So I think that's important. I also feel like smaller think tanks, sometimes a research center, that are active in maybe a particular niche of the sector. So contributing to research and contributing to investigation in the sector is also very key to really bring this knowledge that we are missing. And I think what you mentioned, organizations like Oxfam. I think also there are organizations that work more closely in the case people are particularly interested to work closely to producing countries and therefore like sustainable development. I think also local institutions or local NGOs are very key, because it is true that when we look at the big players, they have an important role in the power dynamics, but then depending on whether you want to be more active in the field on the ground and really understand the challenges, it's also very important to change the dynamics more locally. So I think this is also very, very important. I reiterate the fact that there are also new companies, starting up their great work in many different ways, and creating those connections, creating kind of change from new entrepreneurial opportunities is also a way to make a contribution.
Thank you. And Dylan, I think on your LinkedIn bio, it says Newberry Coffee. So feel free to share a little bit in the chat. So Dylan's asking, could it be said the global coffee value chain is based on, let's say, colonialistic or exploitative systems that are basically based on cheap labor and cheap land? So is it about adjusting the value chain, or we need a whole new value chain?
Yeah, well, Dylan, thank you for this. I think, I haven't said that before because when we talk about colonial systems, sometimes it can be a strong statement, but I do tend to agree. I feel like sometimes it's very hard to change a system that has been built from a very colonial foundation. So that's definitely what's happening in coffee, and what happens not just in coffee, but cocoa and other value chains as well. I think it would be amazing if we could just, delete everything and make it from scratch, but I don't see it as as very realistic. So I really hope that we can little by little try to change what's there, and really have this kind of re-engineering aspects on a step-by-step approach would be probably ideal. But yeah, again, trying to, it's a big sector, so it takes time.
And then, I mean, a good part of my advisory board of a B Corp, that's not a coffee company, but obviously, there's about 8,000 B corporations in the world, and I just did a quick search. There's a number that are coffee companies, either roasters or cafes or wholesale, and B Corps are not perfect. But again, it goes beyond voluntary regulation, saying, "Oh, we care about the environment," or putting out flashy reports that they have to certify People Planet, that they're caring. It's not just words. So when you interact with others who are purchasing coffee, whether it's for a company, wholesaler themselves, obviously everybody has to make their own choice based on where they live and cost and factor, but do you recommend, if something is certified organic, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's fair wages. So is it, do you recommend rainforest certified, fair trade, organic, or just that, because there's so many brands out there and there's a lot of greenwashing. So just any thoughts, not to guilt people, but if you're thinking about these things, how do you pick a company or a product that hopefully is treating the environment and people justly?
Yeah. Well, this is also a very hard question. I think, for me as a consumer, when I just look at myself as a normal consumer and not somebody that knows about coffee, and suggesting to friends and family, I always try to kind of push them to maybe buy more locally. So it could be an Italian roasted coffee from, a smaller roaster company, which might have a higher price point, but by having a higher price point, normally you can somehow assume that hopefully this coffee was paid better, especially because normally they don't buy in bulk and they buy for higher quality products. So this is kind of the type of conversation or suggestion I would have. But of course, that's not always possible. So when you find yourself in a supermarket and you might need to choose one of the many products that you find in front of you on the shelves, would be, well, for me, even though we can say that having a certification label is not a guarantee, but it's definitely something that helps compared to maybe other products. So I would probably say, if you find yourself with the opportunity of choice and say, okay, this product is certified, this product is not certified, and if you don't know anything else about the product, I feel like certification is this extra layer that is telling people that this product that is more sustainable compared to another one. But again, it's not always the case, so it's very complicated. You should you should go and ask directly, but that's of course not always possible. But I do think that the local, like buying locally from smaller companies, is definitely a nice way to contribute and to make sure that your money is going to in a more sustainable effort.
Yeah, so I'll say one of the nice things when we used to live in the US and now in Colombia is farmers markets. And I think there's been a resurgence in farmers markets, and in Medellin we have them, different days all over the city. And obviously they could still be exploitative, but if you're buying directly, and often it is the farmer or farmer's family that's coming, and you can talk to them, and the prices might be a little more expensive, but you're cutting out the shipper. And then also sometimes in Medellin there's some funding for entrepreneurship around conflict. So like when there's festivals, they'll have like, let's say 30 different small scale companies that are bringing together ex-combatants so I mean, obviously that doesn't grow at scale, but there's some really interesting things. And when you can talk to people, of course they can lie and say, yes, we're sustainable or green, or but really thinking, even our friend Marta Salazar, like they really think even about the packaging, because part of coffee, I mean, it's not just the environmental impact if they're using chemicals or not, or how they're farming or crop diversity, but so much of the packaging around coffee, to find ways to seal it, to make it have a longer shelf life. A lot of that packaging is horrible for people and the planet. So Dylan has a question, and if anyone else has questions, feel free to bring them in. We'll start to wrap up soon. So are there other technologies you've seen from other industries, whether it's agriculture or not, that you think either technologies or just practices that the coffee and cacao and banana and all these large scale export crops, that there's something interesting we can learn from another sector or technology?
I think it's more like, thank you, Dylan, for the question. I think it's a process in the sense that, just as an example for coffee, as I was mentioning before, it's maybe not just talking about technology, but it's also talking about the system and how this has been built. The Sustainable Coffee Challenge Guide was the Sustainable Coffee Buyer's Guide that was developed by a company that is called Azar Coffee. Just a couple of years ago, they built a system that was really trying to analyze data information to understand how much somebody should pay, like a buyer should pay, depending on different department of coffee in Colombia, for the farmer to get a prosperous income. And it's it's actually a very basic platform to be used, but then it's very effective if you are a buyer and you want to make a more sustainable choice when you are paying for your green coffee. So that's kind of an example. But then of course there are other systems. Another company I really like, based in the Netherlands, is called Wakuli. They really are trying to make an effort in creating a direct relationship with providers, so that again, the idea of paying farmers more can be kind of a core value of the whole business, and making sure that this coffee can also be accessible to consumers. So the idea is really trying to find new business model potentially, or new ways to make business successful, so that we can also support other people. And again, I think technology can help, but as we said, it's just a part of it, and we have to kind of use the technology to change the system so that we can make this more equal.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll start to wrap up, but just one more big question, then we'll wrap up with a few small ones. So, Catalina and I do small scale angel investing, very small scale impact startups. And I've actually seen quite a number of startups come that are trying to produce coffee alternatives or cacao alternatives because of climate change, and basically saying that the ability of the world to grow these crops is horrific. Like, it's going to be severely impacted by climate change. So any data that, like, is it forecast because of global warming or lack of rain that we're going to see? I mean, one, it's going to impact a lot of people negatively, both in terms of their livelihoods, but also environment. So what is some of the things around climate change, and are there any opportunities, because there's a lot of bad things that are happening, but any opportunities? Are we doing new variations of coffee that are more climate resistant? So just some of your concerns around climate change, and is there any hope or opportunity in this?
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, unfortunately, It is true. I mean, we are moving in a direction in which climate change is affecting and impacting the future of the industry. So for coffee, I remember that I recently read in a report that by 2050, half of the kind of suitable land for Arabica coffee could be lost due to climate change. This, of course, is not affecting Robusta as much, which again is still going to be affecting anyway, and people are already shifting to understand how they can use Robusta to create high quality coffee and also make it more suitable for new areas. But anyway, I think long story short, there is a lot that we have to do as an industry. I'm glad you asked about new coffee varieties. There is an amazing institution called World Coffee Research that started this huge endeavor to really try to make coffee varieties more resilient for the future of the sector, really trying to push, to innovate the genetics to allow people to continue producing coffee, continue drinking coffee after 2050. So I really hope that they can push this work even further. It's very nice because many organizations and private companies in the coffee sector are supporting them, and this is a very important job, not just for the coffee stakeholders internally, but for the global consumption of coffee, which is still a very a product that is in high demand.
Okay. Well, one more slightly big question, then two final ones. So there's all sorts of debates if coffee is good for you or bad for you or neutral. And do you have any data or your own thoughts in terms of, is it obviously it's person specific, but is it if you drink coffee, not that it's going to guarantee you have a longer life, but like what according to your interpretation of the research, if someone comes to you who's relatively healthy and says, good or bad to drink coffee, like not that you're a doctor, but what are your general thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not a doctor, and I can just speak to what I read online. I did read few research lately about the good and positive health benefits of coffee. So that's I can say that about that is that it provides good health in many cases in connection with also cancer prevention, if I'm not mistaken. But again, I'm not an expert on this topic. But in general, from my background in food, I feel that what I can say for any product, not just coffee, is that the key is in quantity of consumption. It's important to kind of not consume too much, consume kind of a good amount. And this really is for any type of food, and make sure that we can get as much as we can from the nutrition coming from all these amazing products, including coffee.
And then in your free time, is there anything you're working on learning or upskilling? It doesn't even have to be profession related, but you're working on becoming a master barista, or you're learning French, or anything that you're trying to or you want to upskill on?
Yeah, no, I think for me, in learning Portuguese, since you mentioned, language is definitely one of the things that is on my to-do list. I would love to move in a Portuguese-speaking countries and be able to learn the language. But it's more on a personal level. I'm in this moment in life, which I really love the flexibility, and I would like to have the opportunity to work remotely from a different country and explore a different different environment. So this is kind of my to-do for the near future.
Okay. And then is there any book or movie or show that you've recently read or watched that doesn't have anything to do with professional activity, but just has been occupying your mind in a good way?
Yeah, I definitely recommend to. I've been reading a lot about dreams and sleep lately. So I would definitely recommend Why We Sleep, the Why We Sleep book, which is one of the best sellers of a few years ago. And I really feel like it brought me a different perspective on, why sleep is is so important for us as humans, and also kind of started my research on understanding more about dreams and also how dreams are so important for us. I think it's a nice read. I would definitely recommend it.
Okay. And then the last two questions. So just how can others help Digital Coffee Futures? So maybe just a little bit more in terms of type of help you're seeking, but also like for someone to, and like you offer courses and consulting. So who is your clientele? So if someone loves coffee, but they're not a farmer, like are there programs, or it's more you're concentrated on growers and roasters and people in the supply chain?
We were definitely concentrated in people in the supply chain. So anybody that works, I would say, from the producing perspective all the way up to importers, and then we're doing some work for roasters, but it's actually smaller in terms of the particular target audience of what we can do for them. And in terms of like how they can reach out to us, they can. I mean, there's plenty of information on our website, so I would suggest people to go and read. And if they're interested or curious to learn more, they can just reach out and send us an email at hello@digitalcoffeefuture.com, and we can explain more. And then in terms of support that we might want, well, we are in this moment where we are kind of changing the narrative about the company. So we're always on the lookout for people that might be willing to share their thoughts and feedback on what we're doing. So again, happy to, if anybody that is listening now or will listen to the podcast later is an expert or an advisor on communication, I'll be happy to be in touch and learn from them.
Okay, and then the last question for people who are interested in agricultural and sustainability and technology, where do you go to just find interesting news? Like, do you conferences, publications, newsletters, podcasts? Like, any favorite ones you say? Like, if you're not necessarily just coffee, but if you're interested in seeing what's working in trends and opportunities, what resources do you find the most valuable?
Yeah, so I follow a couple of newsletters that are really key for me, not just for coffee. It's actually more generic on like food tech. So it has a bit of everything related to food technology. Also, when it comes to it could be meat-based product or others. One is AG Funders, and they also share news about investors and like startup environments and how companies are moving in the industry. And then also Food Hack is an interesting one. They share a weekly newsletter where they inform the audience about the news in food tech as well. So I think these two have been kind of a must read for me. But then, of course, if we talk about sustainable development more general, there is another one that we would recommend. It is called ICT Works, and they always have very nice articles and blogs and news about sustainable development opportunities, just in terms of maybe grants and applications open that companies can apply to, but also very interesting and informative research reports and articles presenting news in the industry. So I would definitely recommend that as well.
Okay, thank you so much for taking time out of your afternoon when you could be drinking coffee or tea and sharing your wisdom and expertise and enthusiasm for coffee and sustainability and impact. And thank you everyone for watching live, or if you listen in the future. And just as we started off, thank you again, Elisa. Please follow Digital Coffee Future, Elisa on LinkedIn, PCN, and please consider sharing and rating the podcast. Again, we're about halfway through season 12. You can go to PCN Global and search by sector or region and find all sorts of amazing people. And I think you're the first guest we've had who has your master's in coffee science. I forgot the exact title. Yes, I think we've had other people in agriculture, but you're the first coffee scientist. And we could have done a whole coffee class on the side. But thank you so much, and everyone have a wonderful afternoon, Elisa. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Craig, for having me. Bye, everyone.
So I'm hitting end. Thank you.